What's up, brother? It's your boy, Mike Muse, on the Conversation, the Mike Muse Show. I am so excited to be in conversation with my next guest for so many reasons. You guys know I love my home state. I'm from Lansing, Michigan, and anytime I can talk with a fellow Michigander, I get so excited. And I get the chance to talk to a very special Michigander, someone that we have to call the Honorable. And that is because she is a member of the Michigan State Supreme Court. And so without further ado, the Honorable Justice Bolden. What's happening?
Good morning. Good morning. Afternoon? I don't know.
Whatever you want. It's whatever you choose. It's all about interpretation of the law,
Hello.
right? It's all about how do you interpret morning. What is morning? Let's define morning.
It depends. It depends. It's a gray area there, right?
Is there a precedent?
And where does evening start?
Yeah, it begins.
Yes.
Oh, you talking Chevron deference already? Okay,
Yes.
we're getting into it, right? Is there precedent for morning? Is there precedent for evening?
We have to research it.
Yeah,
gather all the information, look at the briefs, and make an educated decision.
Oh, you are a justice.
Yeah.
Oh, I see why you got appointed by Governor Whitmer.
Yeah, I did.
And I thought it was because you're a lady of Alpha, Kappa Alpha, Sorority Incorporated.
That might have had a little something to do with it.
Audience, wait till you see this video. I know you're listening to us at home right now or in your cars, on your way shopping, running some errands, but Justice Bolden has been flipping her hair nonstop. I was like, okay, she definitely is an AKA. So that is awesome. I'm a Kappa, so it's all good.
Yes.
And my sister's an AKA too as well.
So you know.
We already know what it is when it ain't.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that is good. How are you feeling, Justice?
I feel great. The posture that I'm in currently, being on the Michigan Supreme Court is amazing, and just running to try to retain my seat. So I've been going all over the state of Michigan, just telling anyone who will listen about this race, because there are so many people that, don't vote in the nonpartisan section.
Yeah.
They don't vote for their justices or judges, and we're a third co-equal branch of government that people really need to engage with. So we are going around, and I feel great.
We're excited. So you are going to be our professor for this next hour of our conversation, because there is so much to unpack, and I feel like the judicial branch is so important more than ever.
Yes.
We are a co-equal branch, as you said, but... And this is me talking to the audience, not the justice. I just feel like the way the judiciary has been leaning into decisions lately, it seems to be more tilted. And I don't say it's necessarily a fault of the judiciary branch as much as it is a misfunction of our legislative branch, right? And not being able to govern because of partisanship. So much is being up and left to the court of law. I created a voting system called Vote Quadrant that really examines how to become a single issue voter. And at the time I created Justice Bolden, it was to really eliminate and to prevent police officers from killing Black people, right? And so I said, in order to do that, these 4 areas of government had to function. It was the mayor, who then appoints a police chief, right? And then looking at our district attorneys who run for office, and then also too looking at judges. And I said all those 4 have a hand in really addressing the criminal justice system, right? And so I really put a focus on judges. And when I did that, I was really amazed about how many people just didn't know, 1, the functionality of a judge or the judicial system, and then 2, that you vote for them.
Yes.
3, I'm guilty of it too as well. In my early on practicing my democracy, I would vote for a judge's name based upon if I like the name of it, how it sounded.
How they sounded,
right? What did I think of them based upon their name?
We're all guilty of that.
Right? And so I was like, we have to stop doing that because it's so important. So I want you just to walk us through so many moments to understand the judicial system as a whole. Is that fair?
That's fair.
And then we're going to unpack you and all those really great stuff too as well. But I did mention appointed. So you were appointed by Governor Whitmer.
Yes.
So talk to us now about, now that you're running, explain that.
Yeah. So, okay, where do I begin? So
This
in
is
Michigan,
Civics 101 right now.
I know. So in Michigan, there are 2 ways that you can become a judge or justice. You can run for a seat, so you can run against an incumbent judge or run for an open seat. We have an age limit in Michigan. So when a judge turns 70, they can no longer run. So sometimes we have seats that are up. So depending upon when they retire, the governor can appoint, or if it's depending upon the timing, someone can run for that seat. So in 2022, I actually ran for Michigan Supreme Court. I was in the Michigan legislature at the time, and I lost that race by 2 percentage points. A vacancy became available on the Michigan Supreme Court by Chief Judge Bridget-Mary McCormick. And so at the end of the year, the governor announced her intention to appoint me to that position, where I started on January 1st of 2023. So I've actually gone through all of the motions of becoming a justice. And so I've been thoroughly vetted by Michiganders, by the governor, to keep this seat.
Yeah. So explain to us, what does a state Supreme Court do?
Yes.
We know often what the Supreme Court does. They're constantly in the news. But a lot of us don't really understand what our state Supreme Court does, right? So explain to us the functionality of a state Supreme Court.
Right. So you have your layers of judicial adjudication. So you have your district courts, where you would see, your traffic offenses, your landlord tenant, your small claims. You have your circuit courts, which has claims over $20,000, or your felony cases. And then you have your court. If you don't like that decision, you would appeal to the Court of Appeals, which is a 3-judge panel that is different every time. And if you don't like the Court of Appeals decision, you appeal to the Michigan Supreme Court. Now, we are similar to the United States Supreme Court in that we don't take up every single case. We are selective, and we only take up the most important cases that affect a lot of Michiganders to try to clarify the law. But even with that, we take a relatively small percentage of cases, but again, with a big impact. And just for context, we get about 200 appeals per month from the Court of Appeals, and we take up about 20 per month of those.
Talk to me a little bit about, I know audience, Justice Bolden is using Michigan a lot as a reference, but this is pretty much a system across the board for states. Every state actually has their own Supreme Court, but the way we just laid out that linear progression is how every state works. Every state Supreme Court is a functionality of the space too as well. So we are using Michigan specifically. That's what she knows, but we are talking about this in general so that every state has the same process. I've always been curious about, how do you determine which cases should come before the court?
That is a really interesting process. And so at least I have to say Michigan specific, because each state Supreme Court may do it a little bit differently. But in Michigan, each judge or each justice has the ability to do what's called a hold. So out of the 200 appeals, we can hold a case for consideration for the body. And once a week, we actually vote on the cases that we're going to give a hearing to, which we're going to deny, and things like that. So any judge or justice can do that. And so it really just depends on if we see an error in the system that we believe needs to be corrected or heard that we think would benefit Michiganders.
What did you see a theme of this previous session of the court? What seemed to be reoccurring, right?
Yeah.
And the reason why I asked that is because audience, if you may recall, I just did a conversation with Meta's Oversight Board, which is, for their perspective, the Supreme Court of a Meta, totally separate functioning body from the government. But what we were talking about is, how do they determine what cases they want to bring forward, right? And so they were just talking about, sometimes it's just, what is the sense of urgency, what seems most urgent, but it's also, too, what are they seeing reflective in similar disputes, right? Until you start determining a pattern, if you will. So I'm just curious, is that applicable?
Yeah, so some things are emergencies. So right now, and it's no secret, I can't expound upon this, but election, the election
We're
issues
seeing that
are
for every state.
Yeah, election issues are coming up that need, urgent review, and can only really be resolved by the Michigan Supreme Court. But we see a lot of criminal issues come to the court. And by the way, we hear every single issue. So a lot of people think we may just do, constitutional law or criminal law. We handle taxes, zoning ordinance issue, anything that can go to court and be disputed can be heard by our court for resolution. And we are the last say in those issues. We're actually getting a lot of termination of parental rights issues. And I think that is probably because of the makeup of the court. We currently have 5 women on the court. I have a 2-year-old. I'm a new mother still. And so we're looking at these cases a little bit more closely. We do have more and more tax issues coming up for whatever reason. I'm not sure. But civil rights issues definitely are pervasive in our consideration.
I love that you talked about the makeup of the court being female and mothers, who may be mothers, and also too about parental and termination rights, because in the vote quadrant system, when I unpack about the judges, I talk about how you can't ask them specific questions on the campaign about how they will rule on a particular case. But I do talk about it's important to ask questions on the campaign trail about a judge's lived experience.
Yes, absolutely.
Because the judge's lived experience will determine how they're viewing and how they will interpret the law. And you just said it. You
That's
just
absolutely
said
correct.
as a mother of a 2-year-old.
Yeah, so we just want to make sure that when those cases come before the court that, you know, we understand what it would be like to have, you know, our rights terminated as a parent. Like, we can relate to that experience. And so we just want to make sure that everything is right in that step of the process. Now, sometimes, you know, that is necessary and required, but we just want to make sure that the process is correct because that's a really big decision. And so we're seeing more and more of those cases. We're seeing a lot of juvenile justice issues, but, you know, so many different things that don't just affect what happened now. Some of these decisions have national implications, to be honest, but also have generational effects, right, of how people in Michigan will live and possibly people in this nation will live for generations to come.
Talk to me about how a person picks where their case should be heard.
That's usually determined
How
by
does that
law.
get determined?
By law. So it depends on the type of case. So if it is, for example, like a landlord-tenant, small claims, that is all in your district court. Under $20,000 of dispute in a civil court, that's going to be your district court. If your dispute is perceived to be over 20,000, that would be in your circuit court. Again, this is Michigan law, so it may be different standards in different states. And then again, your felony cases would be in your circuit court. So it's all prescribed by law, kind of where your case goes.
Are you seeing people using the court system in order to advance political agendas? Do you see them like bypassing where legislation may have been created through legislation, now using it through lawsuits? Because that's what I'm noticing, just as a casual observer, right? Like, not being on a bench, not being a justice, but I'm looking at now, I feel a lot of activists are getting very smart about sidestepping the legislative system and using the court systems in order to advance, ideology. And so I'm just curious, do you see that from a purview? Maybe not in the cases that come before you, maybe not necessarily for the Supreme Court, but are you guys having conversations amongst yourselves when you're off the bench and just having coffee? Are you seeing these things?
From my perspective, I think it's important to, and this is me coming from the Michigan legislature where I was in a very political position. So from our position, it doesn't matter who takes up or who initiated the case. We're going to go by what the law states. And sometimes people win and sometimes people lose. And so the motive for bringing the case is not really something that's in very much consideration for us. But again, that's why it's so important to have judges and justices that can take that lens out of it and say, what are the merits of the case before the court and how is the law applicable? And that's how I approach it. Even though I was in a very political space, I was a judicial law clerk as one of my first jobs coming out of law school. And so I was trained as a neutral. And so, again, sometimes, one side, well, all the times, one side wins, one side loses, but we really don't or at least I don't take motive into that, because at the end of the day, the laws are what is going to ultimately determine the outcome of the case.
I think it's so important what you just said there. And I'm glad I asked the question the way that I did. And I really enjoyed that response because it's about being neutral, but also having that lived experience to recognize whether the motive of this case and to be able to take it out to see, is this legally sound, right? And if this is legally sound, then this should go before it. Audience, I'll talk about this when Justice Bolden isn't here, so I don't want to get her in trouble, but there are cases that have come before the Supreme Court recently where I didn't understand the legality of it. And it seemed so politically charged. And I was shocked that justices have even decided in the Supreme Court to bring forward certain cases, to rule on certain cases about reproductive rights that was settled law. As an engineer, I'm beyond frustrated about the Chevron deference. I talk about that often on this show, that the justices were bringing forward a case that will eliminate the ability for federal agencies in order to determine regulations when justices don't have that science and technology background aspect of that. And so I really do think, audience, as you're thinking about it, we can't vote in the Supreme Court, but audience, if you remember, I do talk about the importance of voting for judges at the local and district level, because that does begin the pipeline to individuals to be considered for the Supreme Court.
It does.
Who can remove that ideology out of the decision-making process of when to bring a case for and then how to rule on it and when to understand when this is politically motivated and not. But I really think it's you having that legislative experience where you can recognize what is politically motivated versus what is legally sound.
Oh, yeah. And I'm very attuned to that. Again, some people think because I came from a political background that it would be difficult for me to separate it.
I think it's opposite.
It is. Thank you.
When the character is there.
Yes.
But that goes why you want to question your judicial candidates about their character, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm very, very cognizant of that and making sure that, we're not overstepping and, legislating through the bench and, doing things like that. I'm very, very cognizant of that because I know what it feels like to be a legislator and having the judicial branch, just completely take something you did out of context.
I want to go a little bit further than your literature experience because what struck me is that you're a defense attorney. You had previous experience as a defense attorney. And I think about Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson having a defense attorney and how that isn't normally seen on the U.S. Supreme Court, but I would imagine also too in other state Supreme Courts. Talk to me about how we just talked about having the legislative experience helps inform your decisions and neutrality. Talk to us about the idea of being a defense attorney and what does that bring to a judgeship? Yeah,
I think it's so important for your lived experience to just empathy and compassion for the people that come before the court, right? So as a defense attorney, obviously I'm informed of the crime that people are charged with, but I got to know my clients and got to know some of their backgrounds and stories of what led them to a particular action. And it's not even, necessarily a leniency thing, but people have a right to an attorney, right, when they commit a crime. And that's an important part of our judicial system that I think needs to be respected. And you have to think about in some cases, especially if you're indigent, you don't know how to navigate the system. You may not have had the education and the resources to really understand what's going on. And the attorney is there to help guide you through that process. And so I have a great respect for both prosecutors and defense attorneys, both needed to make sure that justice is ensured for everyone.
But you're a litigator as well.
Yes, and I was a litigator as well.
See that on both sides.
But just having clients that were charged with crimes just gave me a great sense of compassion and empathy.
Have you had to think about your time as a defense attorney when you've been on the bench, when you've been hearing cases?
Sometimes, we have cases that involve, juveniles sometimes, right? And you have to, think about even putting yourself in that position. For example, the law may say, X, Y, and Z about, being stopped by police. And your lived experience as a Black person versus a white person may be different, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not crafting the law to say one thing or another, but it's bringing that lived experience to the table of where I know it's like to be Black, and I know the conversations that Black families have to have. And so it may or may not change the outcome, but I do think having that lived experience brings a certain conversation to the table that may not be there otherwise.
Yeah. Do you feel, before I ask that question, I want to give context to the question. I always feel, and I get my callers and listeners all the time know that my main priority is democracy. And I always say that people have been able to be ignorant of issues and policy and the functionality of our government because we've had the privilege of democracy, not really understanding that democracy isn't a constitutional right. And so for me, I have this great sense of urgency to educate the public as much as I can on democracy and on the fundamentals of our government and process, because we can no longer sit idle the privilege of having democracy when it can be easily removed. And so that's just me as someone who is just an advocate out here just doing my job, just trying to educate the people. For you, your role is slightly different because you have to examine the Constitution, keep the Constitution, the framework in mind in order to keep democracy intact. How does that make you feel like when you get up in the morning? Like what is that feeling like? Because you determine democracy.
Yeah, so
you give rulings and opinions that help shape and inform the guardrails of our democracy.
Yes. So I think the most important thing for me is to, with each case, looking at it with a unique lens that it deserves, not assuming that one case is exactly like the other, giving time and attention and thoughtfulness to it, taking in all the information and making the best decision possible. I think, when you are so stuck in a particular judicial philosophy, for example, and it kind of drives your thinking towards, a certain conclusion, I think that does a disservice, at least to Michiganders. And so my approach is to take all the information that I can, and also having the experience of being a legislator and having passed 5 bills into law while I was there. I know how the sausage is made. And so I bring that unique perspective to the table. And oftentimes my colleagues will say to me like, oh, Kyra, you were in the legislature. What do you think? And so being at that table, making such important decisions about what Michigan and potentially the nation will look like for generations to come, there's definitely a weight there. But, I have been doing the job. I love the job, and I will continue to fight as hard as I can to bring those lived experiences to the table, to bring my experience as a legislator to the table, to bring my experience as a new mom to the table, to make sure that we're making the best decisions possible.
Are there cases where you feel in the pit of your stomach that what you guys will rule or how you'll rule so much is on the line?
You know what?
And the reason I'm asking this is because, just to be, I like good conversation. And so what we do here is, particularly in this given circumstances, one, salute you for coming up here, because we don't get a chance to hear from a lot of active justices who are currently serving on a bench. 2, we don't hear from judicial candidates. They tend to hide in fear of, for whatever reason, they can kind of skate by, as we like to call it, in the different world that we're in. But we are hearing now, through opinions that the Supreme Court justice specifically have ruled out, we're hearing more emotion in their opinions, whether the majority or the dissenting opinions. And so we're starting to hear that a lot more now, that kind of captures the sense of that. And so I'm just curious, just for you, like, does that ever, are you feeling that right now? And you can say no. I don't know.
Right now, no. And then for us, at least in Michigan, there's such a long process between the time that the case comes to us, as an appeal versus when we write the opinion. And so by that time, I'm usually very, very settled. That does not take away from the fact that sometimes I feel like I have to write separately, which I have done multiple times. And I explain, certain aspects of a case of either, things that I'm concerned about or things that maybe the legislature should, consider. Right. And so by the time it gets to that point, at least up until this point, I have been resolved in my decision making. But I also know that we're a check on the legislative branch and the executive branch. However, if something that we do is, not interpreting in the way that the legislature would require, and this is just for Michigan, the legislature has a right to, fix it or do something. And we sometimes give guidance to them. Yeah. So usually by the time I make a decision, again, thus far, I'm pretty resolved in that decision making.
Why did you want to become a judge?
Oh, my goodness.
You have an interesting constitution. The way you see things, I think, is really interesting. So I'm just curious, why did you choose to?
So I didn't originally. So just for context, I'm currently 36 years old. And a lot of people, I think, see me as this kind of just ambitious person that, was a litigator, went to the legislature, and now is a state Supreme Court justice, the youngest in Michigan's history. And how it actually happened was a congresswoman who was my congresswoman, Brenda Lawrence, actually asked me to run. Yes, Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence, who was the first Black woman mayor of Southfield, which I grew up in. She asked me to run in June of 2021. And I told her no. I wanted to expand my family and have a child, and I didn't think it would be a great idea to run a statewide campaign and have a full-time job in the legislature and have a baby. But that's exactly what I ended up doing. And I did that because of my daughter. Her name is Emmy, and I really couldn't look her in the eye and say that she can do anything when her mother was too afraid to run for Michigan Supreme Court, right? We had never had that representation. I'm the first Black woman. And I didn't want her to grow up in a Michigan and in a nation where she couldn't see herself in positions of power. And I know that sometimes it takes a lot of sacrifice and service to be able to be in those positions of power. But I wanted to try. I wanted to try for my daughter and for Michigan because I love Michigan.
That's amazing. So your daughter was your North Star. She was.
I was about in my second trimester. And I just kept having this feeling, I had to grow up my entire adult life without having a Black woman on the Michigan Supreme Court. And how could I deny her?
What would you say to our listeners as we close who are in other states, who are maybe thinking about how can I do something, right? What would you say to them, or why it's important for them to think about running for a judgeship? Because obviously the easy one is run for mayor or senator or governor, but what would you say to those?
It's not as sexy, but we are really the last word in a lot of these very, very important issues. I like to think of us as the bookend to so many important issues in our states and in our country. And you need that backstop. You need that neutral, ruling, the check and balance to make sure that the trains are running. And so I definitely think the judiciary branch is overlooked. And I'm doing my best to just try to bring more attention to it, because I do think there's an accountability measure that a lot of judges don't receive, to be quite frank. And so I'm very active on my Instagram and social media, probably a lot more active than some people maybe want me to be. But I think, it's important to share with people what I'm doing and, just kind of how I am. And so I think the judiciary branch is so important. And we make such important decisions, and it just gets overlooked by voters, and it gets overlooked by great candidates.
I thought I was going to end it, but I want to do an exercise as we end. I always tell my audience about Vote Quadrant the type of questions that you should ask a judicial candidate, right? To understand their lived experience. And I think you can handle these questions.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. Where is the last place you vacationed?
Oh my goodness. So my team is going to kill me.
When you probably do take vacations.
I don't remember the last time I've actually taken a vacation.
Okay.
I work 7 days a week. If it's not, doing campaigning, doing my actual job as a justice, or being a mom. But I will say I want to go to a beach somewhere.
Where was the last beach you've been on?
The last beach,
Miami, LA.
Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico?
Yes.
Okay, so Puerto Rico. Let's say Puerto Rico was your last trip.
It was my trip. Vacations and trips are different.
So vacation.
But it was my last trip, yes.
Justice Bolden, you make this so complicated.
I'm a judge. You have to get the wording correct. Interpretation matters.
We're trying to get to know you, your lived experience.
I'm sorry, my last trip, Puerto Rico.
Okay, awesome. All right. What is the last book that you read?
The last book
or a book that you enjoy.
Thank you. Because people ask me that, and I get so inundated writing my opinions and reading my briefs that I really don't have a lot of time to read for pleasure.
I'll tell you mine.
But yes.
Dan Brown, Angels and Demons.
Oh, yes. Oh, very nice.
My friends laugh at me because I said that should have won a Pulitzer. And they're like, Mike, stop it. You're
very
embarrassing yourself. I'm like, I don't care. It's a great movie.
I will tell you the book that's on my reading list, and I actually received it as a gift yesterday, is The Nine. About the U.S. Supreme Court. Yeah.
Nice.
Yes.
Okay, so you're sticking to the script. Okay, I'm saying.
Well, that's why I have.
What's the last concert you've gone to?
Beyonce.
Ooh, the Renaissance one?
Of course.
Ah, that was a good one. I was there. What's your favorite? What Beyonce song are you rocking out to right now?
I love I Care.
Ooh, throwback.
Yeah, it's one of those shower songs that you just scream.
You're in a mood right now.
You think you're on key.
Yeah, and you're not. Yeah, I'm letting you know you're not.
I'm not at all. I cannot sing at all.
Cool, that's a powerful vocal arrangement song. That's not an easy song to sing.
No, it's not.
Especially when you get to the bridge.
I practice, but it will never be heard outside of my bathroom. Yeah.
A movie that you've recently seen.
What was it? Oh, movie. Recently watched Bad Boys.
I like that one. Yeah, that's a good one.
It was really good.
What are you binging?
Okay. Selling Sunset.
Oh, reality. Yo, go off, Justice.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yes.
But I know why. Real estate investments, negotiations, art of the deal.
Yes.
Everything is tracking.
I love it.
Everything is tracking with you right now. All right. A cupcake or a cookie?
A cookie.
What kind?
Probably oatmeal.
I'm a chocolate chip guy.
Okay.
As long as you didn't say peanut butter, you're still safe with me.
Oh, no. Oatmeal. I don't like cake, actually. Wait. I don't have cake for my birthdays. I don't like it.
I don't know if I can trust you now.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can trust anybody who doesn't like cake.
What
did cake do to you, Justice?
Will it redeem me if I say I eat pound cake?
No, what did it do to you?
But I can't eat birthday cake.
What did cake do to you?
It just doesn't taste good to me.
What? Who says that?
I know. I'm sorry. Maybe I should have kept that to myself. I'm sorry. Pound cake, though.
See? Are you ready for a fun fact from me?
Yeah.
I don't like pound cake.
Oh, okay. So we're opposite.
No, we're definitely opposite. Yeah. You got to whisper that. I don't want my black card being taken away. I don't want it. My grandmother, may she rest in peace, she was so sweet. She knew that I didn't eat any pound cake. And so what she would do is she would bake me a box cake. She would bake me the Betty Crocker cherry chip cake that came in the box with the cherry frosting. Because she knew her baby did not like pound cake. And she make sure she said, no one eats Mikey's cake because he does not eat pound cake. Yeah, and she was known for her pound cake, which is hilarious.
Yes.
But
I mean,
but that's what it is. All right, well, speaking of cake and food.
Yes.
If you have a choice to go to a restaurant to have any cuisine, what is going to be the cuisine?
Any type of Pasta.
Oh, I thought you were going to say pasta. I just knew it. You gave me pasta.
I gave pasta?
Yeah. You gave me Italian. You gave me Italian.
Cacio e pepe.
Yeah, you gave me Italian.
I can do chicken parmigiana, pasta any day of the week.
Yeah, I'm a Thai guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pad Thai with no bean sprouts with extra peanut sauce.
Pad see or curry.
Don't try and come to my side now. Don't try and come to my side now.
When I was pregnant, that was what I craved.
You over in Italy.
I'm in Italy.
You the Amalfi Coast.
My daughter really liked the Thai food when I was pregnant. So
that is awesome. Yes. Justice Bolden, it was so great to get to know you.
Yes, likewise.
Audience, that is a good exercise in how you get a chance to know a judge's character, what they think, their lived experiences, and their lifestyles, and what they will all bring that to the table. And I think that any justice who loves Beyonce, oatmeal cookies, and loves bad boys, I think they could make a good justice. Justice Bolden, thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed getting to know you, and this is a good exercise in really understanding our judicial system and the importance of it and why it's important to have good people on the bench.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Cheers to you.
Thank you.
All right. Peace.